My hands trembled as I watched my brother Jackson smash his fist through our mother's antique china cabinet. 30 years of being the family afterthought had culminated in this moment. $30 million? You? He screamed, face contorted with rage. Our Christmas dinner sat forgotten as my secret wealth became public. My mother shrieked accusations of betrayal while my father just stared at his plate, silent as always. What nobody understood was that my fortune came with a price nobody would want to pay. And tonight, everything would change. I always knew I was different from the rest of my family. Growing up in our middle-class neighborhood in Springfield, I learned early on that being the firstborn didn't grant me any special privileges. In fact, it was quite the opposite. From the moment my brother Jackson arrived when I was 4 years old, it became clear that he was destined to be the golden child of our family. Our home wasn't large, a modest 4-bedroom house with a small backyard, but there was an invisible divide that separated my world from Jackson's. My parents, especially my mother Amanda, made no effort to hide their preference. While I wore secondhand clothes and made do with what we had, Jackson always had the newest, shiniest things. I still remember my 10th birthday. I had been hoping for a bicycle like my friend Heather had gotten. Instead, I received a set of encyclopedias. For your studies, my mother had said with a dismissive wave. 3 months later, when Jackson turned 6, he got not only the bicycle I had wished for, but also a complete set of sports equipment and a lavish party with 30 kids from his kindergarten class. Jackson is more social, my mother explained when I asked why I had only been allowed to invite 2 friends for my celebration. He needs more encouragement to develop those skills. The pattern continued throughout our childhood. When I turned 16 and asked about getting a car, like many of my friends had, my father mumbled something about financial constraints, while my mother was more direct. We can't afford 2 cars for teenagers, Brielle. You can get a job if you want one so badly. Jackson is more social, my mother explained when I asked why I had only been allowed to invite 2 friends for my celebration. He needs more encouragement to develop those skills. On Jackson's 16th birthday, my parents surprised him with a brand new Ford Mustang. I watched from the window of my bedroom as he jumped up and down in excitement, my father beaming proudly, while my mother took photos. The used Honda I had finally saved enough to buy sat in the street, pushed aside to make room in the driveway for Jackson's shiny new car. Your brother has different needs, my father would say, on the rare occasions he acknowledged the disparity. He was always the quiet one, avoiding confrontation with my domineering mother at all costs. His passivity was its own form of betrayal. Education was another area, where the differences couldn't be more stark. Despite my consistently high grades and participation in academic competitions, my parents decided that the local public high school was perfectly adequate for me. Jackson, whose report cards were mediocre at best, was enrolled in Westfield Academy, an exclusive private school with an eye-watering tuition. Jackson needs more structure and individual attention, my mother insisted. You're already doing fine on your own. That became the theme of my childhood. I was always fine on my own, while Jackson apparently needed everything handed to him on a silver platter. During my senior year of high school, I applied to colleges without any guidance from my parents. They were too busy attending Jackson's football games and school events. When my acceptance letters came in, including one from a prestigious university with a partial scholarship, my mother merely glanced at it and said, "That's nice, but how will you pay for the rest? We're saving for Jackson's education." The inequality was painful, but it taught me self-reliance. While my brother grew accustomed to having everything done for him, I learned to solve problems, work hard, and make my own way. By 18, I had developed a determination that would later become my greatest asset. One afternoon during my final summer before college, while looking for my birth certificate in my father's home office, I discovered a letter tucked inside an old photo album. It was from my grandmother, who had passed away when I was 12. The contents shook me to my core. "I worry about little Brielle," she had written to my father. Amanda has never treated her as her own since you married. A child knows when she's not wanted, Thomas. Just because she isn't Amanda's biological child doesn't mean she deserves less love. The room spun as I read those words. Amanda wasn't my biological mother. She was my stepmother who had married my father when I was too young to remember. Suddenly, years of differential treatment made a tragic kind of sense. I wasn't just the less favored child. In Amanda's eyes, I wasn't really hers at all. I confronted my father that evening when he came home from work. His face crumpled with shame as he confirmed what the letter had revealed. My biological mother had left when I was 18 months old, unable to handle the responsibilities of parenthood. He had met Amanda 6 months later, and they were married before I turned 3. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I demanded, tears streaming down my face. "We thought it would be easier this way," he said weakly. "Amanda didn't want you to feel different, but I had always felt different. Now I understood why." The revelation about my biological mother changed something fundamental within me. If Amanda wasn't really my mother, then her rejection didn't have to define me. I threw myself into preparing for college with renewed purpose, determined to create a life that didn't depend on family approval. I worked my way through state university, taking on extra jobs to cover what my small scholarship didn't. Meanwhile, Jackson was sent to Riverside University, a private institution with prestige and a price tag to match. He lasted 3 semesters before dropping out, claiming the academic environment stifled his creativity. My parents expressed disappointment but quickly funded his first business venture, a sports memorabilia shop that closed within 8 months. During those college years, I discovered my aptitude for finance. Numbers made sense to me in a way people often didn't. I could see patterns, anticipate market movements, and understand risk in ways that impressed my professors. My junior year internship at Westbrook Investments turned into a job offer before I even graduated. "You have an instinct for this," my supervisor Martin told me. "That's something we can't teach." While Jackson bounced between ideas and ventures back home, each funded by increasingly stressed parents, I was building something sustainable. By 26, I had been promoted twice and had started making small but strategic investments of my own. I lived modestly in a small apartment, saving every extra dollar. Contact with my family became increasingly infrequent. Christmas cards, occasional phone calls, and even more occasional visits marked the extent of our relationship. Each interaction followed the same pattern. My mother would talk extensively about Jackson's latest project. My father would remain mostly silent, and nobody would ask meaningful questions about my life. It was easier to maintain distance. During those years, I built my own support network. My mentor, Diane, a senior partner at the firm, took me under her wing. Unlike my mother, she saw my potential and nurtured it relentlessly. "Never apologize for your ambition," she told me over lunch one day. "Men never do." My best friend Taylor, whom I met in a financial literacy workshop I taught on weekends, became the sister I never had. She understood my drive because she shared it, having also come from a family that failed to recognize her worth. By my early 30s, my career had taken an unexpected turn. After 8 years at Westbrook, I left to start my own investment advisory firm, focused on emerging technologies. It was a risk, but calculated risks were my specialty. What no one in my family knew was that 3 years earlier, I had made an investment that changed everything. A college acquaintance had reached out about a tech startup developing revolutionary battery technology. The company wasn't publicly traded yet, but they were accepting private investors. "It's high risk," my acquaintance warned. "But if it works, the returns could be exponential." I researched the technology extensively, met with the development team, and made a decision to invest nearly all my savings, $200,000. It was terrifying to put so much on a single bet, but my analysis suggested the potential rewards outweighed the risk. When the company went public 2 years later, the value of my investment increased 50-fold overnight. By the time I left Westbrook, my net worth had crossed the 8-figure mark, though I told no one except Taylor and Diane. I continued living modestly and working diligently, reinvesting most of my gains. Meanwhile, back in Springfield, my parents were facing their own financial realities. From the bits of information I gathered during our rare conversations, they had refinanced their house twice to fund Jackson's failed ventures. His pattern was consistent: enthusiasm, promises, initial success, then collapse, followed by explanations about why it wasn't his fault. There was the organic juice bar that closed after health code violations, the fitness center that couldn't compete with established chains, the food truck that literally went up in flames due to faulty wiring. After each failure, my parents would dip further into their retirement savings to fund the next guaranteed success. By the time I turned 34, my initial investment had grown to $30 million. The battery technology had proven revolutionary, being adopted by major automotive manufacturers and renewable energy companies worldwide. I had diversified since then, but that single investment had transformed my financial reality completely. No one in my family had any idea. To them, I was just Brielle who worked something in finance in the city. My success remained my private victory, a secret I harbored not out of spite, but self-protection. I had learned long ago that my achievements would never be celebrated the way Jackson's mere efforts were. That December, after declining for 3 consecutive years, I reluctantly agreed to join my family for Christmas dinner. My father's voice had sounded frailer on the phone, and something in his tone had pierced through my carefully constructed walls. "Please, Brielle," he had said quietly. "It would mean a lot to have everyone home this year." Little did I know that this Christmas would shatter the delicate illusion we had all been maintaining for decades. The drive back to Springfield filled me with a familiar dread. Though I now had the means to arrive in luxury, I deliberately rented a modest mid-sized sedan. Something about pulling up to my childhood home in an expensive car felt unnecessarily provocative. Winter had always been beautiful in our town, with tidy houses adorned with colorful lights and the occasional blanket of snow making everything look like a holiday postcard. As I turned onto Maple Street, I noticed our house looked smaller than I remembered. The Christmas decorations were the same ones from my childhood, slightly more faded now. I sat in the car for several minutes, gathering my courage. In my designer jeans and simple cashmere sweater, I looked successful but not ostentatiously wealthy. The small gift bags on the passenger seat contained carefully chosen presents, thoughtful but not extravagant. I had learned that anything too expensive would prompt uncomfortable questions. Taking a deep breath, I finally approached the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open to reveal my father. The sight of him shocked me. In just 3 years, he seemed to have aged a decade. His once robust frame had thinned considerably. His shoulders stooped, and deep lines creased his face. But his eyes lit up when he saw me, a genuine warmth that made my chest tight with emotion. "Brielle," he said, his voice softer than I remembered. "You came." The hug he gave me was awkward but sincere, and I found myself blinking back unexpected tears. My mother appeared behind him, her greeting considerably cooler. "Well, look who decided to join the family this year," she said, giving me a quick, perfunctory embrace. She hadn't changed much. Her hair still perfectly dyed and styled, her holiday sweater immaculate. "Dinner will be ready in an hour," she informed me. "Jackson's running late as usual. You can put your things in your old room." My old room had long since been converted into a home office, with just a pull-out sofa for overnight guests. I noticed that Jackson's childhood bedroom remained untouched, his high school trophies still displayed prominently despite being in his 30s. As I arranged my overnight bag, I heard my parents talking in hushed tones downstairs. I couldn't make out the words, but the tension in their voices was unmistakable. When I rejoined them in the living room, my father was sipping what looked like whiskey, while my mother busied herself with last-minute preparations. "How's work, Brielle?" my father asked, seemingly eager to fill the silence. Before I could answer, the front door burst open, and Jackson strode in, bringing with him a gust of cold air and his characteristic energy. "Sorry I'm late," he announced to the room, not sounding sorry at all. Traffic was a nightmare, and I had to finish up some business calls. This new venture is really taking off. He looked essentially the same as when I'd last seen him, perhaps with a few more pounds around the middle and slightly thinner hair. His clothes were expensive, his watch flashy, all creating an image of success that I knew from experience was likely hollow. He spotted me and his eyebrows shot up. Well, well, the prodigal sister returns. He gave me a bear hug that lifted me off the ground. Looking good, Bree. City life must be treating you well. My mother immediately shifted into her familiar mode of fawning attention. Jackson, darling, you must be starving. Let me get you something to drink. Tell us all about this new business. It sounds so exciting. Just like that, the dynamic I had grown up with reasserted itself. Jackson commanded the room, regaling our parents with tales of his latest enterprise, something to do with cryptocurrency and sustainable agriculture that sounded implausible at best. My mother hung on every word, while my father nodded along, occasionally glancing at me with an unreadable expression. Dinner was a masterclass in conversational inequality. Jackson dominated, my mother facilitated, my father observed, and I existed on the periphery. The Christmas roast was perfectly cooked, the table beautifully set with the good china that only came out for special occasions. Everything was just as I remembered, including my place in the family hierarchy. As Jackson described his need for just a little more capital to take his business to the next level, I noticed the exchange of glances between my parents. There was worry there, and something else. Fear, perhaps. We're so proud of you, taking these entrepreneurial risks, my mother said, reaching over to pat his hand. Not everyone has that kind of vision. The implied comparison to me hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Speaking of money, my father said suddenly, his voice uncharacteristically firm, your mother and I need to discuss something with both of you. My mother shot him a warning look, which he ignored. We've supported your ventures for years, Jackson, he continued. But we've reached a point where we can't continue at the same level. Jackson's expression darkened. What are you talking about? My father sighed heavily. We've taken out a second mortgage on the house to help with your cryptocurrency project. If it doesn't pay off soon, we might lose our home. The room fell silent. I stared at my plate, processing this information. My parents had put their home at risk for another of Jackson's dubious schemes. It will pay off, Jackson insisted, his tone defensive. You just need to be patient. This isn't like the other times. That's what you said about the food truck, my mother said quietly. And the juice bar. It was the first time I had ever heard her express anything but complete faith in Jackson. The shift was subtle but significant. Jackson turned to me, clearly looking to change the subject. What about you, Brielle? Still pushing papers at that investment firm? I actually started my own advisory company a few years ago, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Oh? For the first time that evening, he seemed genuinely interested in my life. How's that going? Making good money? I do all right, I said carefully. My father coughed, a painful rattling sound that concerned me. When he caught his breath, he said, I saw your name in Finance Monthly a while back. Something about tech investments. I froze. I had given an interview months ago, discussing investment strategies but carefully avoiding mention of my personal success. I hadn't thought my father would see it, much less remember. What was that about? My mother asked, suddenly attentive. Before I could formulate a response, Jackson had pulled out his phone. Finance Monthly? Let me check that out. My stomach dropped as I watched him typing. This was not how I had planned for my family to learn about my financial situation, if ever. The evening was about to take a dramatic turn that would permanently alter our family dynamic. Just a small feature on emerging technologies, I said, trying to downplay my father's comment. Nothing interesting. But Jackson was already scrolling through his phone, his expression changing from casual curiosity to intense focus. My mother, sensing something in the air, leaned toward him. What does it say? She asked. Hold on, Jackson muttered, his fingers tapping rapidly. I'm finding it now. The silence at the table grew heavier as we waited. I considered making an excuse to leave the room, but knew it would only delay the inevitable. The secret I had kept for years was about to be exposed. Here it is, Jackson finally said, his voice unnaturally flat. Brielle Morgan, founder of Morgan Advisory Partners. He looked up at me, his expression unreadable. It says you were an early investor in quantum cell battery technology. My father looked confused. What's that? Jackson's eyes never left my face. Only the biggest battery tech breakthrough in the last 20 years. His voice grew louder. The article says your initial investment has returned, and I quote, exceptional value that has positioned Morgan among the most successful young investors in the technology sector. I made a good investment, I acknowledged, trying to keep my voice steady. The company did well. Did well? Jackson laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me see what else I can find. My mother was watching me now, her eyes narrowing. Brielle, what is Jackson talking about? How much money do you have? That's not really appropriate dinner conversation, I said, attempting to maintain some boundary. Here we go, Jackson interrupted, his face growing progressively redder as he read from his phone. Brielle Morgan's stake in Quantum Cell, initially valued at approximately $200,000, is now estimated to be worth over $30 million, following the company's recent partnerships with major automotive manufacturers. The room went completely still. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father's eyes widened in shock. $30 million? My mother finally whispered. That can't be right. Is it? Jackson demanded, his voice rising. Is that true, Brielle? I took a deep breath. The article exaggerates somewhat, but yes, my investments have done very well. $30 million, Jackson repeated, enunciating each word. While Mom and Dad are about to lose their house because they've been supporting me, you've been sitting on $30 million and said nothing? I earned that money through my own work and took significant risks, I replied, feeling defensive despite myself. It wasn't relevant to your situation. Not relevant? Jackson's voice rose to a shout. Our parents are about to be homeless. That's a bit dramatic, I countered. And if that's the case, it's because they chose to fund your failed businesses despite all evidence that it was unwise. My mother gasped. How dare you speak that way about your brother's enterprises? He's a visionary. He's a serial failure who's been enabled his entire life, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Years of pent-up frustration were finally finding voice. Jackson stood abruptly, his chair toppling backward. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Little Miss Perfect with her fancy job and secret millions. His face was contorted with rage now. You've always been jealous of me. I laughed incredulously. Jealous? Of what? Your string of failures? The fact that you've never accomplished anything without Mom and Dad bailing you out? That's enough, my mother shrieked, rising to her feet. Apologize to your brother right now. Something inside me snapped. No. I will not apologize for speaking the truth after 30 years of being treated like I don't matter. Jackson's face turned an alarming shade of purple. With a roar of anger, he swept his arm across the table, sending dishes crashing to the floor. Before anyone could react, he stormed over to the antique china cabinet that had been in our family for generations and drove his fist through the glass door. The sound of shattering glass punctuated the chaos. Blood dripped from Jackson's knuckles as he turned back to face me, his breath coming in ragged gasps. $30 million, he spat. You could have helped at any time. You could have saved them from this, but you just watched from your ivory tower. Jackson, my mother screamed, rushing to examine his bleeding hand. Look what you've done to yourself. My father remained seated, staring at his plate as if nothing unusual was happening. His passivity, so familiar and yet still so painful to witness, made something twist inside me. Why would I help? I asked quietly. When have any of you ever helped me? We gave you everything, my mother shrieked, her arm around Jackson's shoulders. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. You gave me the bare minimum while giving him everything, I corrected her. And you're not even my real mother, are you, Amanda? The room went deadly silent. My father's head snapped up, his face ashen. What did you just say? My mother whispered. I found Grandma's letter years ago, I told her, feeling strangely calm now that everything was coming to the surface. I know you're my stepmother. I know I was never really your child. Jackson looked confused, his anger momentarily displaced by this new information. What is she talking about, Mom? My mother's face had gone white. Thomas, she said to my father, her voice shaking. You told her? No, I answered for him. He didn't tell me anything. That's been the problem all along, hasn't it? All the secrets, all the lies. Jackson was still processing this revelation. Wait, so Brielle is only my half-sister? Why didn't anyone tell me? Because it wasn't important, my mother snapped. I raised her as my own. No, I said firmly. You absolutely did not. You tolerated me while lavishing everything on your biological son. That's not true, she protested, but her eyes couldn't meet mine. Jackson's shock was quickly morphing back into anger. So what if she's not your biological daughter? She still let you go into debt while she was rolling in money. He turned to me, a cruel smile forming on his lips. You think I didn't know I was the favorite? I've always known, and I used it. Every time I needed money, every time I wanted something, I knew exactly how to get it from them. And it worked. Every single time. The casual cruelty of his admissions stunned me into silence. He had been consciously manipulating our parents for years, and he was proud of it. Jackson, my father finally spoke, his voice barely audible. What are you saying? I'm saying I played the game, Jackson replied with a shrug. Brielle was too proud or too stupid to figure it out. If she had just played along, maybe she could have gotten whatever she wanted to. My mother was shaking her head in denial, but I could see the doubt creeping into her expression. For perhaps the first time, she was seeing Jackson clearly. You're bleeding on the carpet, I told him coldly. Maybe you should take care of that before you dig yourself any deeper. He looked down at his injured hand as if noticing it for the first time. This is your fault, he muttered, but the fire had gone out of his accusations. My father stood up slowly, his movements pained. I think we all need some time to calm down, he said, though his voice lacked its usual conciliatory tone. There was something different in his manner now, a resignation that hadn't been there before. Brielle, he said, turning to me, there are things you should know, things I should have told you long ago. My mother moved to interrupt him, but he held up his hand. No, Amanda, no more secrets. It's time for the truth. The aftermath of Jackson's outburst was chaos. My mother frantically searched for a first aid kit while Jackson wrapped his bleeding hand in a kitchen towel, muttering under his breath. The Christmas dinner lay ruined on the table and floor, a fitting metaphor for our family. Let me see that, my father said to Jackson, examining his wounded hand with surprising authority. You'll need stitches. The urgent care on Main is open until 9. I'm not going anywhere until we sort this out, Jackson insisted, though his bravado was undermined by the wince of pain that followed. There's nothing to sort out, my mother interjected, her voice shrill. Brielle has been keeping secrets, and now she's trying to turn this around on us. Amanda, my father said, with more firmness than I had ever heard from him. Take Jackson to get his hand looked at. Brielle and I will clean up here. My mother looked like she wanted to protest, but something in my father's expression stopped her. She gathered her purse and Jackson's coat, urging him toward the door with promises of returning quickly. As soon as they left, my father sank heavily into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. Dad, I said tentatively, are you okay? He shook his head slowly. No, Brielle, I'm not okay. I haven't been okay for a very long time. I started gathering broken dishes from the floor, needing something to do with my hands. You wanted to tell me something? Yes, he sighed. But first, there's something I need to tell you about myself. He paused, seeming to gather his strength. I'm dying, Brielle. The plate in my hand clattered back to the floor. What? Pancreatic cancer, he said simply. Stage 4. They gave me 6 months, and that was 4 months ago. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Does Jackson know? Does Mom? Your mother knows. Jackson doesn't. She didn't want to burden him with it. He made air quotes with his fingers, a gesture so uncharacteristic that it momentarily distracted me from the horror of his news. I abandoned the mess on the floor and moved to sit beside him. Why didn't you tell me? I tried calling several times but could never find the right words, he admitted. Then I thought maybe having everyone home for Christmas might be my last chance to set things right. Set what right? I asked, though part of me already knew. The plate in my hand clattered back to the floor. What? Your mother knows. Jackson doesn't. She didn't want to burden him with it. He made air quotes with his fingers, a gesture so uncharacteristic that it momentarily distracted me from the horror of his news. Everything, he said, his voice breaking. The way we treated you, the way I stood by and let it happen. My whole life of silence and cowardice. So you married Amanda, I supplied. No, let me finish. I need to say this. He took a labored breath. When your biological mother left, I was devastated. Not just for myself, but for you. You were so little, just learning to talk. I was terrified of raising you alone. What happened? At first, things were good, but when Jackson was born, he trailed off, looking into the distance. Something changed. She became obsessed with him, and you became secondary. I told myself it was normal, that she just needed time to bond with her new baby, but months turned into years, and the pattern was set. Why didn't you ever stand up for me? I asked, the question that had haunted me for decades. His eyes filled with tears. Because I'm a weak man, Brielle. I always have been. It was easier to keep the peace, to tell myself you were strong and resilient. And you were. But that wasn't fair to you. No child should have to be that strong. The honesty of his admission was both painful and strangely liberating. For the first time, someone in my family was acknowledging what I had always known. I was proud of you, he continued. So proud. Every achievement, every obstacle you overcame, I kept a scrapbook, you know, hidden in my work office. All your report cards, newspaper clippings when you won that math competition, your college acceptance letters. I would look at it sometimes when I was alone and think about all you'd accomplished despite us, not because of us. I was crying openly now, tears streaming down my face. I didn't know. How could you? I never told you. He reached for my hand. I've made so many mistakes, Brielle, but my biggest regret is that I never told you how much I admired you, how sorry I was for not being the father you deserved. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the weight of his confessions. There's more, he finally said, about Jackson and your mother. I wiped my eyes. What about them? Jackson has been stealing from us for years, he said, his voice hardening slightly. Not just the money we gave him willingly for his businesses. He's taken cash from your mother's purse, used our credit cards without permission, forged my signature on loan documents. How do you know this? I've suspected for a while, but I confirmed it last month when I found bank statements he'd tried to hide. He took out a $15,000 cash advance on my credit card to pay gambling debts. The revelation didn't surprise me as much as it should have. Jackson had always taken whatever he wanted. Does Mom know? I asked. She refuses to believe it, he replied. Even when I showed her the evidence, she makes excuses, says he must have had good reasons. Her denial runs deep. And the house? Is it really about to be foreclosed on? We've missed 2 mortgage payments, he admitted, between Jackson's latest venture and my medical bills. He left the sentence unfinished. I struggled to process all this information. Why are you telling me now? Because I'm running out of time, he said simply. And because you deserve the truth. All of it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. I found this in Jackson's car last week when I borrowed it to go to a doctor's appointment. He'd left it on the seat. I unfolded the paper to find a medical letter addressed to my father. It detailed treatment options for an experimental therapy that might extend his life by a year or more. "I never saw this," I said, confused. "Neither did I," my father replied grimly. "Jackson has been hiding my medical correspondence. This letter is dated 2 months ago. The deadline to enroll in the trial was last month." A cold fury washed over me. "He deliberately kept this from you? Why?" "I can only guess," my father said. "Maybe he was afraid treatment would drain more money that could otherwise go to him. Maybe he didn't want to deal with a prolonged illness. Or maybe he just couldn't be bothered to share important mail." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Not only had Jackson manipulated our parents for decades, but he had potentially shortened our father's life through his selfishness. "What are you going to do?" I asked. My father looked older than I had ever seen him. "I don't know, Brielle. Your mother won't hear a word against him. Our finances are in ruins. My health is failing. I'm not sure there's anything I can do at this point, except try to make peace with my mistakes." I heard a car door slam outside, signaling my mother and Jackson's return. My father squeezed my hand. "Whatever you decide to do with this information, I understand," he said quickly. "You owe us nothing, but I needed you to know the truth before." He couldn't finish the sentence. As the front door opened, I made a decision. I had spent my life being the forgotten child of this family, but I was not powerless anymore. For the first time, I saw my family clearly, with all its dysfunction and pain. And for the first time, I knew exactly what I needed to do. After the disastrous Christmas dinner, I checked into the Springfield Grand Hotel, needing space to process everything I had learned. The luxury suite felt like a different universe from the tension-filled house I had just left. I sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, phone in hand, still reeling from the evening's revelations. "He hid your father's medical correspondence?" Taylor asked, her voice incredulous over the speakerphone. "That's beyond manipulation, Brielle. That's actively harmful." "I know," I replied, rubbing my temples. "I keep thinking there must be some explanation, but there isn't. It was deliberate." "And your mother still defends him?" "Completely. She practically pushed me out the door, saying I had upset Jackson enough for one evening and that we could discuss my deception another time." Taylor's sigh was audible. Classic enabler behavior. She's so invested in the golden child narrative that she can't see reality anymore. On the other line, Diane was more pragmatic. "The question now is what you're going to do about it. Your father has terminal cancer. Your parents are facing foreclosure. And your brother is actively harmful to both of them." I had been considering this question since leaving my parents' house. "I could just walk away," I admitted. "Part of me wants to. They made their choices." "You could," Diane agreed. "No one would blame you after how they've treated you. But that's not you," Taylor added softly. "You wouldn't be wrestling with this if walking away was really an option." I had been considering this question since leaving my parents' house. "I could just walk away," I admitted. "Part of me wants to. They made their choices." "I need more information," I decided. "About their financial situation, about Dad's medical options, about what Jackson has really been doing." Over the next 3 days, I conducted my own investigation. I hired a private financial investigator to review my parents' finances, contacted my father's doctors directly to discuss treatment possibilities, and even visited the bank that held their mortgage. What I discovered was worse than I had imagined. My parents were not only facing foreclosure, but were also drowning in credit card debt. My father's medical bills had depleted what remained of their retirement savings, and there were multiple loans taken out in my father's name that he had never signed for. On December 28th, I arranged to meet my mother for coffee, while Jackson was supposedly at a business meeting. She arrived 20 minutes late, her expression guarded. "I only have a little time," she said coolly as she sat down. "Jackson needs me to review some documents for his investors later." Over the next 3 days, I conducted my own investigation. I hired a private financial investigator to review my parents' finances, contacted my father's doctors directly to discuss treatment possibilities, and even visited the bank that held their mortgage. Yes, she replied defensively. It's very innovative. You wouldn't understand. Rather than arguing, I slid a folder across the table. I've been looking into your financial situation. Her face flushed. That's none of your business. Yes, she replied defensively. It's very innovative. You wouldn't understand. She flinched at my directness but didn't deny either point. We'll figure something out. We always do. By figure something out, do you mean find more money to give to Jackson? I asked. Because that's been your solution for the past 30 years, and look where it's gotten you. You've always been jealous of your brother's creative spirit, she snapped. Just because you got lucky with one investment doesn't make you an expert on his potential. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay focused. Mom, I have evidence that Jackson has been forging Dad's signature on loan documents. He's been stealing from you for years. She shook her head vehemently. That's ridiculous. He would never do that. I opened the folder and laid out copies of loan applications with blatantly forged signatures, credit card statements showing cash advances at casinos, and bank transfers from my parents' account to Jackson's personal account. He needed that money, she insisted, though her voice wavered. His businesses require capital. His businesses have all failed, I countered gently. And this isn't about business expenses. These are personal expenses, gambling debts, luxury purchases. Her hands trembled as she pushed the documents away. You're trying to turn me against my son. I'm trying to show you the truth before it's too late, I said. Dad doesn't have much time left. Do you really want to spend his final months dealing with foreclosure and financial ruin because of Jackson's manipulation? For a moment, I thought I saw a crack in her armor, a flicker of doubt. But it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I don't have to listen to this, she said, standing abruptly. Jackson warned me you'd try something like this out of spite. She left without another word, leaving me frustrated but not surprised. Decades of enabling behavior wouldn't change overnight. My next stop was Jackson's apartment, an unexpectedly luxurious downtown loft that I knew my parents were helping him pay for. He opened the door wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than our parents' monthly mortgage payment. Well, look who it is, he said with a smirk. Miss 30 million herself. Come to gloat some more? We need to talk, I replied, pushing past him into the apartment. Sure, make yourself at home, he said sarcastically, closing the door. What do you want? I looked around at the high-end furnishings, the expensive electronics, the overall display of wealth that he hadn't earned. Nice place. How many of Mom and Dad's dollars went into this? They support my entrepreneurial ventures because they believe in me, he replied defensively. Unlike some people. Cut the crap, Jackson, I said, my patience exhausted. I know about the forged signatures. I know about the gambling debts. I know you hid Dad's medical correspondence. For a split second, surprise flashed across his face before he recovered his composure. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. And it stops now. I placed a USB drive on his coffee table. This contains copies of all the evidence I've gathered. Loan applications with forged signatures, credit card statements, the medical letters you intercepted, enough to pursue criminal charges if necessary. He laughed, but there was an edge of nervousness to it. You're bluffing. You wouldn't do that to your own brother. Wouldn't I? I held his gaze steadily. You've stolen from our parents. You've potentially shortened Dad's life by hiding treatment options. You've manipulated them for decades. Give me one good reason why I should protect you. His facade began to crack. What do you want from me? I want you to come clean to Mom and Dad about everything. I want you to stop taking their money, and I want you to start acting like their son instead of their parasite. His expression hardened. Or what? You'll have me arrested? Go ahead. Mom will never believe you over me. She never has. This isn't about Mom, I replied. This is about Dad, who's dying while you bleed him dry. This is about basic human decency, which you seem to have none of. Don't lecture me about decency, he spat. You've got $30 million and haven't given them a cent. Because my money would have gone straight into your pocket, I retorted. But that's about to change. His eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means I'm stepping in to fix the mess you've created, but on my terms. I'm paying off their mortgage, settling their debts, and arranging for Dad's medical care. But you won't see a dime of it. You can't do that, he protested. They're my parents too. Then start acting like it, I said coldly. If you care about them at all, you'll come clean about what you've done and start making amends. And if I don't, he challenged, then I'll make sure they know everything. Every lie, every theft, every manipulation, including the medical letters you hid, which could have extended Dad's life. He paled at that. For all his flaws, even Jackson understood the severity of what he'd done. You'll destroy them if you tell them that, he said quietly. It would break Mom's heart. And Dad, he doesn't need that burden now. It was the first genuine concern for our parents I'd heard from him, and it gave me a glimmer of hope that perhaps there was something salvageable in him after all. Then help me find another way, I offered. One that protects them while stopping the damage you're causing. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, unexpectedly, his shoulders slumped, and he sank onto his sofa. I'm in trouble, Brielle, he finally admitted, his voice barely audible. Serious trouble. Gambling debts, bad investments. People are after me for money I don't have. How much? I asked. About $300,000, he said, not meeting my eyes. It was a substantial amount, but nothing compared to what I could afford. Still, I wasn't about to hand him a check. I'll help you settle those debts, I said carefully. But only if you agree to my conditions, which are professional help for your gambling, financial transparency with me going forward, no more money from Mom and Dad, period. And you come clean about most of what you've done except perhaps the medical letters, since you're right that it would devastate them. He considered my offer, desperation warring with pride on his face. And if I agree? What then? Then we work together to make Dad's final months peaceful and secure, I said. And we try to build something better from the wreckage of our family. It wasn't forgiveness I was offering. That would take much longer, if it ever came at all. But it was a path forward, a chance to break the destructive patterns that had defined our family for decades. As I left Jackson's apartment that evening, I felt neither triumph nor satisfaction. The road ahead would be difficult, with no guarantee of success. But for the first time since discovering the truth about my family, I felt something close to hope. The transformation of my family didn't happen overnight. It began with a series of difficult conversations and uncomfortable truths, gradually building toward something none of us had experienced before: honesty. I started by meeting with my parents together, laying out a comprehensive plan for their financial security and my father's medical care. Their modest living room felt crowded with unspoken emotions as I presented the details. I want to help, I explained, keeping my tone gentle but firm. I'm in a position to do so, and I'd like to set up a trust that will cover your mortgage, Dad's medical expenses, and provide you with a secure retirement. My mother's pride immediately surfaced. We don't need your charity, she said stiffly. It's not charity, I countered. It's family, taking care of family. Isn't that what you've always done for Jackson? The comparison silenced her momentarily. My father, looking more frail with each passing day, reached for my hand. Thank you, Brielle, but there must be conditions to your offer. His perceptiveness surprised me. Yes, there are. The trust will be specifically for your living expenses and medical care. It can't be used to fund any more of Jackson's ventures. As expected, my mother bristled. So you're using your money to control us? No, I said calmly. I'm using my money to help you, but I won't enable destructive patterns that have harmed this family for years. Before she could argue further, there was a knock at the door. Jackson entered, looking uncharacteristically subdued. We had rehearsed this moment, though I wasn't entirely sure he would follow through. Mom, Dad, he said, his voice tight with nervousness. There's something I need to tell you. What followed was a watered-down version of the truth, but truth nonetheless. Jackson admitted to manipulating them financially, to taking money without permission, to lying about his business prospects. He didn't mention the hidden medical correspondence, as we'd agreed, but he confessed enough that my parents couldn't deny the reality of his behavior any longer. My mother cycled through denial, anger, and bargaining as Jackson spoke. "You must be exaggerating," she insisted. "There must be explanations." "There are explanations, Mom," Jackson said quietly, "but not good ones. I took advantage of your love and support. I lied to you both, repeatedly." My father, whose silence had defined so much of my childhood, found his voice. "We let this happen, Amanda. We created this situation by never setting boundaries, by always making excuses." It was the first time I had ever heard him stand up to her directly, and the shock on my mother's face mirrored my own. In the days that followed, we established a new framework for our family. I set up a medical trust for my father, finding specialists who believed he might qualify for a new treatment protocol despite missing the previous deadline. The financial trust for my parents provided security while ensuring Jackson couldn't access the funds. For Jackson, I arranged addiction counseling and financial management courses, making his debt repayment conditional on his attendance and progress. It wasn't easy for him to accept help with strings attached, but his desperation outweighed his pride. My mother was the most resistant to change. Decades of enabling behavior had become her identity, and she struggled to redefine her relationship with her son. There were tearful arguments and attempts to circumvent the new boundaries, but gradually she began to accept the new reality. "He's still my son," she told me one afternoon, 6 weeks after our initial confrontation. "I still want to help him. Helping him doesn't mean giving him whatever he wants," I explained gently. "Sometimes true help means saying no, setting boundaries, expecting accountability." It was a concept foreign to her maternal instincts, but slowly she began to understand. My father's response to the changes was the most profound. Released from the burden of financial stress and family secrets, he focused on his health with renewed determination. The experimental treatment we found was aggressive, but promising, and his doctors were cautiously optimistic about extending his prognosis. "I never thought I'd get a second chance," he told me one day, as I drove him home from treatment. "Not just with my health, but with you, with our family. We're taking it one day at a time," I reminded him, though I shared his cautious hope. By summer, 6 months after that fateful Christmas dinner, we gathered again as a family. This time, it was at my newly purchased home in Springfield, a comfortable place where I had decided to spend half my time to be closer to my father during his treatment. The dinner was nothing like our previous gathering. Jackson arrived on time, sober, and without grandiose tales of business success. Instead, he spoke honestly about his progress in therapy and his new job as an assistant manager at a local sporting goods store. "It's not glamorous," he admitted, "but it's honest work. And my boss says I have potential for advancement if I stick with it." My mother, who might once have lamented this waste of his talents, simply nodded and said, "That's wonderful, Jackson. I'm proud of you for making a fresh start." My father, whose health had stabilized with the new treatment, looked around the table with quiet satisfaction. He had gained back some weight, and though he tired easily, the immediate crisis had passed. "I never thought I'd see this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "My family, together, talking honestly with each other." "We've got a long way to go, Dad," I reminded him, not wanting to overstate our progress. "But we've made a start," he replied. "That's more than I ever dared hope for." Later that evening, as we sat on the porch watching fireflies illuminate the summer darkness, my father turned to me. "You know what I've learned through all this?" he asked. "What's that?" "True wealth has nothing to do with money," he said. "For years, I thought providing financially was enough, that it excused my emotional absence. I was wrong. Real wealth is having the courage to face difficult truths, to set boundaries, to demand better from yourself and those you love. His words resonated deeply with my own journey. My financial success had given me power and independence, but it was the emotional work of these past months that had truly enriched my life. Jackson joined us on the porch, hesitantly taking a seat. "The therapist asked me today why I was always so jealous of you," he said to me. "Even when I had everything, and you had nothing." "What did you tell him?" I asked, genuinely curious. "That I think I always knew my success was artificial," he admitted. "Everything was handed to me, so nothing felt earned. But you, everything you achieved, you earned through your own efforts. That kind of success can't be taken away." It was the most insight I had ever heard from my brother, and it gave me hope that perhaps his changes weren't merely superficial or temporary. My mother appeared in the doorway. "Room for one more?" she asked tentatively. I moved over to make space for her. Our relationship remained the most complicated, with decades of hurt not easily overcome. But we were trying, in small ways, to build something new. "I've been thinking about your grandmother," she said unexpectedly. "About that letter you found." I tensed, not sure where this was leading. "She was right," my mother continued. "I never treated you as my own. That was my failure, not yours. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I see it now. I see you." Tears welled in my eyes at this acknowledgement I had waited a lifetime to hear. It wasn't a magical healing of all past wounds, but it was a beginning. 1 year after that fateful Christmas, my father's cancer went into partial remission. The doctors cautioned that it wasn't a cure, but it had given him precious time he hadn't expected to have. My parents remained in their home, now paid off and renovated to accommodate my father's medical needs. Jackson continued his recovery, now managing the sporting goods store and leading a financial responsibility group for recovering gamblers. Our relationship had evolved into something resembling actual siblinghood, built on honesty rather than competition. My mother and I developed a cautious friendship. The mother-daughter relationship we might have had was long past, but we found common ground in our mutual love for my father and our desire to support Jackson's recovery. As for me, I expanded my investment firm to include a foundation focused on supporting children from unequal family dynamics. The work became a passion, transforming my personal pain into purpose. My journey taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in self-worth, in healthy boundaries, in the courage to speak difficult truths, and in the capacity for growth even after decades of dysfunction. Money had given me power in my family, but it was how I used that power that truly mattered. The broken family of my childhood could never be fully repaired, but from its fragments we had built something new, something honest, something worth preserving. Have you ever experienced favoritism in your family? How did it shape you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about overcoming family challenges. Don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their family struggles. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to live your life.